Anyone that knows me well enough can tell you that I don't like mobile games. I especially don't like gacha games. For the layman, that means free-to-play games that are designed around enhancements or upgrades that cost real money. These games are designed around exploiting people who lack impulse control, and even worse, gambling addicts, into draining their wallets from microtransactions.
Premium! The meum is Latin for not really.
Maybe this exploitative practice could be forgiven if the gameplay was actually good, but most mobile games are just utter garbage designed for mass appeal. So, with all that being said, I actually kinda liked Mega Man X Dive.
It's not true! That's impossible!
Released in 2020, this mobile game had online support for about 4 years. Afterwards, it was re-released for Steam and mobile in an offline form, appropriately called Mega Man X Dive Offline. That's the version I played. The story is basically that you, the player, are a big Mega Man fan, and oh no, there's suddenly a break in the space-time continuum or whatever, and now you're in the game. Except, all the Mega Man games have been scattered around, and bosses are appearing in the wrong levels, and everything's all mixed up. But by playing through the stages, you'll be able to correct them to their original state. Look, the story is fucking terrible, and it really doesn't even try. I mean, the story really does not even try to make sense or be good at all. But then again, it's a Mega Man X game. Are we really doing this for the story? I think Capcom knows its audience. And speaking of which, remember when I said in the X8 video how Capcom decided to embrace full-on horniness and fanservice? Well, this game is the full manifestation of that. From the completely superfluous assistant character Rico, really? To the abundance of, well, weeb shit. For example, Alia and Lair both get swimsuit outfits and bridal outfits. Hey Capcom, how about a female Reploid that's a doctor or a president, huh? Despite this technically being an X game, it pulls material from other Mega Man games as well. The gameplay is most similar to the X games, so maybe that's why it's called X. But if you're a Battle Network or Legends or even ZX fan, you'll see some series representation. There's literally dozens of characters to play as, and they're beautifully rendered in 3D, supposedly using the same engine from the Maverick Hunter X game. As a Mega Man fan, it's amazing seeing not just X1 through 6 characters in full 3D, but Battle Network and others as well. And they really don't skimp out either. Everyone has a good amount of special moves, and each character has their own voiceovers, not to mention brand new avatar artwork as well. The sheer amount of original artwork and 3D modeling for this game is incredible, and for a mobile game especially, it's just crazy. The X games existed in a time period before we really had good promo or concept art preservation, so to see all these Mega Man IPs in full HD is pretty special. To make a comparison, Fire Emblem Heroes is a very similar game in theory. It's a mobile gacha title where you're collecting characters from all the different Fire Emblem games. A big appeal to that game is that there was mountains of original art made for these pre-existing characters. And while I love that idea, the art styles they picked really didn't reflect the original characters at all. They also chose multiple design styles from different artists, which made the whole thing feel like a giant hodgepodge of fan art. Conversely, all of Dive's art feels like it comes from the same artist. The style is cohesive throughout, which I really appreciate. Another reason why Dive works better than something like Heroes is that the gameplay is a better recreation of its source material. In Heroes, you're playing these really dumb, watered-down versions of Fire Emblem battles, but it's like going from chess to playing tic-tac-toe. In Dive, the basic gameplay of the X series is replicated pretty dang well. That being said, it took me a long time to get used to the controls. I do not like tapping on a screen to play a game. I need buttons. Fortunately, there is an option to remap the buttons if you have a controller, and the gameplay seems to be slowed down and designed around the limitations of what a player can manage on a phone. So basically, for a phone game, it controls as well as it can. You could run, do wall jumps, and use your primary and secondary weapons. It controls well enough, and the stages are designed around the sort of platforming you could reasonably do by tapping on a phone. It's a little bit of a watered-down Mega Man experience in that way, at least at first. As the game gets more difficult, the core gameplay evolves pretty significantly, but we'll get into that in a minute. Rather than the 8 Maverick bosses, you'll instead go through a handful of worlds with short individual levels which are about a minute long. At first this seems a little tedious, but as the levels progress, the difficulty ramps up pretty extremely, and the shorter levels start to make more sense. You're gonna need to strategize in order to survive. This game doesn't give you much in terms of health or healing items, so you'll need a character who is not only completely decked out, but who is constantly getting upgraded in order to keep up with the ramping difficulty of the game. Some of these bosses are legitimately hard. This is where the other half of the gameplay takes place. Basically, everything about how you play this game is customizable. From the characters you bring into battle, to the weapons they use, to the special moves they use, to the special moves the weapons use, to the special moves that the special moves use. It's a lot.
I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude.
And honestly, the biggest detriment to this game, in my opinion at least, is that they really don't explain anything. Customizing and leveling up a character or weapon is one thing, but cards and chips really should have been explained because there's really a lot of nuance to them. Plus, you'll be getting all sorts of collectibles in the form of different jewels and microchips and other stuff, and I'm to this day not sure what half of this stuff does. As much as I love customizing stuff, the micromanaging could be a bit much, especially when it's drawn out for the sake of being drawn out. Like, to unlock a character, you'll need currency that is specific to that character, called memories. So if you want to unlock Lair, you'll need 30 Lair memories. If you want to unlock Palette, you'll need 30 Palette memories. Why couldn't they just have one unified currency? Well, I have to imagine the reason for this is to soak in as much microtransactions as possible.
Hello, I like money.
And considering the ramping difficulty and how you pretty much have to upgrade everything in order to advance, I can see myself blowing through a lot of microtransactions here.
Money!
Fortunately, the offline version of the game makes points and rewards more reasonable to attain, so the pay-to-win aspect is completely removed. Incidentally, if you played the original mobile game and invested a bunch of time and money into the characters and power-ups,
congratulations, you played yourself.
None of that will transfer to offline. For me, it didn't matter because I just discovered the game, but for those players that got super invested since 2020, you'll probably be a little pissed that you've got to start from scratch. There's also a few modes removed from the original version of the game that inherently wouldn't work in an offline mode, like player versus player or online ranking stuff. This isn't a big deal to me, but it's worth mentioning. The special events and limited edition stuff, however, like holiday-related costumes, are all included. So if a New Year themed cinnamon is your jam, you should be pretty pleased. You all remember cinnamon, right? Cinnamon. Don't get me wrong though, there is fun to be had with all the micromanaging of your character. The player's limited health and the difficulty of the enemies means you'll have to think pretty strategically about which cards and chips and weapons to equip, and for which scenario. An especially hard boss might mean equipping a card that gives you bonus attack power, specifically against bosses. For a level with a lot of hard-to-reach enemies, a homing missile might be the best weapon to bring. I mentioned the story being bad, and I mean it. The story freaking stinks. I'm very obsessive over completing things for the sake of completing things, so I'll watch a movie I've started or finish a book that's not particularly good just to see what happens. This may be the only game I've ever played where I skipped the cutscenes. The writing is like if someone made a fan fiction of X6's English dub, so it's just a version of a translation, basically. But like I said, I'm not exactly playing a Mega Man game for the story. Still, it would have made the game feel more complete if the story at least tried a little. Mega Man X Dive really is a game for the fans. It's been a lot of fun playing 3D versions of X1 stages, listening to X4 songs, and playing as X8 characters, all at the same time. Even a lot of the bosses have their same attack patterns. It kinda does feel like an authentic Mega Man experience. This is a game that obviously has a pretty strong foundation in nostalgia. There's a lot of Easter eggs and deep cuts here, like getting to unlock Dark Mega Man from Legends and he's kicking a soda machine, or selecting Proto Man and his little whistle theme plays. There's a lot of ways the game could have cut corners, but instead it went out of its way to provide as much fan service as possible. And also, it threw in a bunch of crazy stuff like this inexplicable Zero Dance, and I'm all for it.
Ikusi!
あいにくそんなに頭がいい方じゃなくても
Mega Man X Dive is a surprisingly good time. It's not a proper X game or anything, but there's still a lot of cool things here that Ultra fans will appreciate. You could certainly do worse for a mobile game.